What is the concept of society? I mean, when we talk about society, what are we really talking about?
Well, one good starting point is McGee. According to McGee, society is essentially the largest indistinguishable unit of people who interact and share a common way of organizing themselves. It's that big overarching system that guides how we all live and work together.
That sounds pretty clear, but it wasn't always seen that way, was it? My sources mention that early thinkers often kind of grouped society and culture together, use the terms almost interchangeably.
You're right. Historically, yeah, classical evolutionists didn't draw a sharp line. But then, as social anthropology developed, say, in Britain and cultural anthropology in America, that crucial distinction started to emerge. People started separating them out. And if you think about why we even form societies in the first place, well, functionalist thinkers suggest it's because we need to fulfill our basic needs. Food, safety, belonging. Our interconnectedness really comes from this mutual dependence. We need each other.
So it's not just about being in the same place geographically, but about needing each other to get things done. That's a powerful idea. Your sources also highlight that society is more than just like a collection of individuals. McIver famously called it a web of social relations. What does that mean for us?
It means there's this sense of mutual recognition. We see ourselves as part of a larger whole connected by these relationships. And what's interesting, kind of a paradox really, is that while having things in common, some likeness is essential, our differences are just as vital. Without those differences, without varied skills or perspectives, there'd be no real need for us to interact or cooperate in the same way. It's the unique contributions that drive the system.
Ah. Huh. So we need to be similar enough to connect, but different enough to actually need each other. And that naturally leads to interdependence and cooperation as key ingredients, right?
Absolutely. Thinkers like Parsons and LaPierre, they viewed society as groups of people in these constant reciprocal relationships, each fulfilling needs for the others. So this perspective suggests society isn't just a random gathering, it's a dynamic system. Everyone, every group plays a part. And maybe a surprising fact from the sources is that this concept isn't just for humans. Many other species also form complex societies.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does that tell us about the very essence of connection? Maybe something fundamental about how life organizes itself. Okay, let's move on then. Our next question builds directly on this. Can you present a comparison between society and culture? We've established society as that largest interacting unit, the organizational structure. So where does culture fit in?
Right. Well, for culture, a classic definition comes from E.B. Tylor back in 1871. He described it as that complex whole, which includes capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So you can think of it like this. If society is the stage and the actors, then culture is maybe the script, the costumes. The rule of the performance is the content of our social lives.
Ah, okay. That helps. They seem so intertwined, and like we said, early anthropologists often use them interchangeably. But your sources really zero in on how we eventually untangled them, or tried to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet with the growth of anthropology, especially in Britain and America, different ways of seeing their relationship emerged. Your sources lay out three main views, and they're worth touching on because they really highlight the nuances here.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because these different perspectives shape how we see human interaction. So the first view, championed by people like Malinowski, sees culture as kind of all-embracing. In this view, culture includes everything, social organization, structure, society itself. It's the big umbrella.
Then you have the second view, which creates more of a clear split, a dichotomy. This was pretty common among British anthropologists like Radcliffe-Brown. He argued that society is about the relationships between people and groups, while culture is the design or the way of human behavior. Nadel took it a step further, suggesting culture is a way of life, and society is the organized group that lives that way.
Like the people versus the plan.
Sort of, yeah.
And then there's a third view, kind of a middle path, offered by thinkers like Levi-Strauss. They suggested society and culture are two different aspects of the same social reality, just viewed from different angles.
For them, culture relates more to our actions and behaviors, while society is more about our relationships and groupings.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think a modern consensus is that while we can distinguish them analytically, culture and society are deeply interwoven. They're interdependent. You truly can't imagine one existing without the other. Which raises a good question for you, the listener. Can you think of a society that exists without a culture? Or a culture without a society? It's almost impossible, isn't it? It really makes you pause, yeah. Think about your own community for a second. Maybe a specific cultural practice, a holiday, a tradition. Doesn't it instantly make you think of the social structure it relies on? Or the other way around? They really are always dancing together. All right, let's keep diving into these building blocks. Our next question asks, can you define social institutions, highlighting their importance, characteristics, and types?
Okay, social institutions. McIver and Page give us a solid definition here. They call them established forms or the condition of a procedure characteristic of group activity. Aqua. In simpler terms, maybe, they are the organized, systematic ways groups in a society do things. They're governed by defined rules and customs. Think of marriage, for example. It's an institution, right? With clear norms, principles, guiding how couples and families relate.
So they're like the established blueprints for how we organize major parts of our lives. Why are these blueprints so crucial? Your sources offer a couple of key perspectives. Functionalists say institutions satisfy basic needs, biological, psychological for individuals, and for the whole society. And structural functionalists emphasize their role in maintaining continuity, unity. They really are the stable foundations that keep everything running, aren't they?
They absolutely are. And they have distinct characteristics. Every institution usually has a clear objective, a purpose. They act as a means of controlling individuals, often providing more stable social control than, say, just public opinion. They're governed by rules and regulations. They have definite proceedings shaped by customs and beliefs. And importantly, their function depends on collective action. Lots of people participating.
Right. Now, let's talk types. Your sources give us a pretty clear breakdown. We have primary institutions. These are fundamental. They operate in 5 basic areas of life, deeply rooted in human nature. You find them almost everywhere. First, family establishing kinship, think marriage, divorce, then government or the state dealing with power like democracy, parliament, religion guiding our relationship with the supernatural through temples, churches, economy regulating goods and services like trade, and finally, education transmitting knowledge, schools, colleges.
hmm And then building on those, we have secondary institutions. These are essentially derived from the primary ones, maybe more specialized. Lister F. Ward had a great quote, calling institutions the means for controlling and utilization of social energy. He called them the backbone of any society and its culture, which really highlights just how fundamental these structures are. They shape who we are and how we interact constantly.
Okay, from these big institutions, let's zoom in a bit. Let's focus on the smaller, more personal building blocks within them. Our next question, define social groups, highlighting their characteristics and types.
Right, social groups.
Yeah.
McIver again defines a social group as any collection of human beings brought into social relationships with one another.
Ah.
So it's more than just people standing near each other. There's a recognized connection, maybe a shared feeling.
Exactly. And these groups, they have clear characteristics that make them more than just a crowd, right? First, members are involved in reciprocal relationships. There's an interdependence, a give and take. Second, there's often that strong sense of unity, that WE feeling. You feel part of something bigger. Third, they usually exist because they fulfill common interests for the members. Fourth, they're guided by certain norms, rules of behavior that everyone in the group generally accepts. And finally, they're dynamic. They change, they evolve as the needs and behaviors of the members shift.
And when it comes to types, Cooley's classification is really widely used, very helpful. He split social groups into 2 main categories. First, you have primary groups. These are typically small, intimate groups. People have face-to-face interactions, strong personal bonds, deep cooperation. Think of your family, your closest childhood friends. These are often seen as the heart, the nucleus of any social organization. They shape our behavior, our personality from a really young age. Crucial for social order.
Okay, family, close friends. That makes sense. And the other type.
Secondary groups. These groups tend to be larger, less intimate, often more formal. Membership is typically based on rules, maybe specific goals. It's also involuntary, but usually for a specific personal benefit like a professional association, a large company, a political party. We see these groups becoming much more prominent in modern life, definitely taking on functions that maybe primary groups used to handle.
That's interesting.
But what's also fascinating is that even within these big, formal secondary groups, think about a large workplace or a university smaller, informal primary groups still form. Little cliques, close work friends. It's like a testament to our fundamental human need for that close connection, no matter the setting.
It really is, isn't it? You see it everywhere. Think about your own life for a moment. Where do you see these primary and secondary groups playing out? How do they feel different when you're part of them?
Okay, now we're moving into some really thought-provoking territory. This one often sparks a lot of discussion. Our 5th question. Define social stratification. Present the anthropological perspectives prevailing on it. Right. Social stratification. Basically, this refers to the ways a society organizes itself by ranking its members into a hierarchy. Different layers, if you will. Yep. This ranking is typically based on factors like class, status, or power, and how societies create these different levels among people.
And this is where we start confronting some, well, stark realities about how societies operate, isn't it? What are the key characteristics of this ranking system? Your sources say it's rooted in social inequality. That's fundamental. And importantly, these inequalities, they become institutionalized. They're often seen as legitimate, just the way things are, by society itself. The basis for this inequality can vary a lot. You mentioned India, historically caste, in the West, often class. But crucially, it's always social, not biological. People within the same layer, the same stratum, tend to share a common lifestyle. And power definitely plays a huge role in keeping these divisions in place.
Exactly. And we can see different ways that stratification actually plays out in practice. First, there's caste. This is a hierarchical, usually closed social group. Your rank, rights, duties are set at birth, often tied to tradition, maybe occupation. It's generally endogamous, meaning people marry within their caste. In India, you hear about Varna, the four broad categories, and Jati, the many specific hereditary groups. Second, you have class. Here, individuals share a similar economic status, but their position is often achieved, at least in theory, rather than just given at birth. Ranking can depend on what a society values: prestige, wealth, education. And lastly, historically, there was the estate system. Think medieval Europe: clergy, nobility, commoners. Their lives revolved around land, feudal relationships. That system doesn't really exist today.
Okay, so we have these systems of ranking, but how do societies actually view this? Is it seen as good, bad, necessary? Your sources give us two incredibly different, almost opposite takes on this. Functionalists like Durkheim, Parsons, Merton, they argue that stratification actually serves a positive purpose, a function. They believed it ensures group solidarity, political stability, economic cooperation. It basically makes society more efficient. It's seen as necessary for a complex society to work.
Right, a necessary structure.
Right.
But then on the complete other hand, you have Marxists. They saw stratification, especially class divisions based on economics, as the root cause of all conflict and revolution in society. They viewed it as inherently creating inequality, economic, social, political, because it denies equal opportunities to large segments of the population. So this really highlights a central tension, doesn't it? How can the same thing be seen as essential for order by some and the source of deep conflict by others?
Yeah, it's a fundamental debate. It makes you think about the trade-offs societies make, balancing efficiency maybe versus equity. It certainly challenges us to think about fairness and opportunity in our own world. Okay, let's zoom in further now, focusing on individuals within these layered societies. Our sixth question is, define the concepts of status and role in detail.
Status and role. These are absolutely fundamental for understanding individual behavior in a social context. And they were really systematically detailed by the anthropologist Ralph Linton back in his 1936 book, The Study of Man. He gave us the basic framework we still use.
Let's start with status. How did Linton define it?
Linton defines status as a position in a particular social pattern associated with a collection of rights and duties. Right? So it's not just any position, it's one that comes with specific expectations and privileges attached.
Okay, and it has two main connotations, right? It refers to the social position itself, but also to a person's ranking, like higher or lower status.
Exactly. And Linton identified two main types. First, ascribed status. This is the status you're given at birth, based on things you can't control, like your family background, your sex, age, maybe your caste in some societies. You don't earn it, it's a sign. These statuses tend to be pretty rigid, stable. Think about the Indian caste system lasting centuries. They often limit individual mobility. You're kind of stuck with them.
Right, and the other type.
That's achieved status. This is the status you gain through your own personal efforts, your choices, your achievements. Things like your profession, becoming a doctor, getting married, your social class in many societies. This type of status is much more flexible. It can change throughout your life. It usually requires certain preconditions, like getting a degree to be a doctor, but it offers far greater freedom of mobility.
Okay, so status is the position. Now let's talk
Okay.
about role. How does that relate?
Linton made a really crucial distinction here. He called role the dynamic aspect of status. Essentially, when you take the rights and duties associated with your status and you put them into action, you're performing a role. So a role is the pattern of behavior associated with a particular status. It's what you do because of the position you hold.
Got it. And the meaning of a role really comes alive in interaction, doesn't it? Like the role of father only makes sense in relation to son or daughter. Teacher needs student.
Precisely. The meaning is relational. And Hahnemann pointed out that roles play a huge part in shaping our personality. All the interactions, the expectations, even the conflicts tied to our roles influence who we become. And Slotkin added that society actually regulates behavior by establishing these customary relationships between different roles. It creates predictability.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for us today, thinking about the contemporary significance. Your sources mentioned that role conflicts seem to have increased in modern society. Why would that be?
Well, it's often linked to things like rapid modernization, new and sometimes clashing values, maybe weakening traditional ties like kinship. These changes can cause confusion about our status or about how we're supposed to perform our roles. You might have competing expectations. For instance, Davis noted some potential negatives. Ascribed status brings rigidity, restricted mobility. But achieved status, while offering freedom, can also lead to problems like overspecialization, maybe too much individualism, a loss of social cohesion if everyone's just out for themselves. And of course, no society is purely one or the other. We're always navigating a mix. Ultimately, you could say social interaction is often status interaction. We're always aware, consciously or not, of our position relative to others. We also have what's called a role repertoire. There's the total sum of all the different roles any one individual performs. And when the role expectations associated with these different roles clash or aren't met, That's when you get role conflict.
That's a powerful point, and it really brings it home. It raises a question for you listening. How often do you find yourself balancing different roles in your own life, maybe parent, employee, friend, sibling? And when do those expectations clash or become difficult to manage? It happens all the time, doesn't it? Okay, let's try to put some of these pieces together now. Let's look at the bigger picture with our next question. Tell us about social structure.
Right, social structure. It's often seen as one of the two main components of any social system, working alongside something called social organization. Marxists, for example, tended to view social structure as a key mechanism that ensures social continuity, basically keeping things stable and, well, conserving the existing system.
Okay, keeping things going. And Radcliffe-Brown, in his famous 1952 book, Structure and Function in Primitive Society, how did he define it?
Radcliffe-Brown gave us a really influential definition. He called social structure the total network of social relationships in a society. He saw it as the continuing, persistent arrangement of persons and groups in relation to each other.
And it includes all those elements we've just been talking about, right? Institutions, status, and role, they're all part of the structure.
Exactly, they're the building blocks. Radcliffe-Brown emphasized that we should really view social structure through the lens of institutions, because institutions are the frameworks that control and define the specific statuses and roles within a society. They provide the overall pattern.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, your sources have a great example that brings this abstract idea to life. The Bathonga people of Eastern Africa. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, the Batonk example is classic Radcliffe-Brown. Among them, the institution of family creates a very specific and quite interesting asymmetrical joking relationship. It's between a mother's brother, so your maternal uncle, and his sister's son, the nephew. The nephew can actually be quite disrespectful, joke around, maybe even take things from his uncle. And tradition dictates the uncle must not retaliate. He has to take it good-naturedly.
Huh, that's unusual, especially
Compared to the relationship with one's father's brother. That relationship requires deep respect from the nephew. It's a totally different dynamic. Now, what's fascinating is how Radcliffe-Brown explained this. He argued this seemingly small, specific interaction isn't just a random custom. It actually serves a much larger purpose. It helps to maintain the patrilineage descent traced through the father's line and the overall Bathonga social structure. It manages potential tensions in the kinship system. It shows us how even seemingly minor social rules can be deeply ingrained and purposeful, reinforcing a society's fundamental relationships.
Wow, so a specific joking relationship is actually part of the glue holding their social structure together. That's fascinating. Okay, finally, let's explore one last concept, which is about how we compare ourselves to others, maybe even groups we don't belong to. Our last question for this deep dive. Explain the concept of reference groups and its application in India.
Right, reference groups. It connects back to social groups, because it's a particular type of social group, but with a twist. You don't necessarily have to be a member. The concept was first introduced by Heyman, but it was really developed significantly by the sociologist R.K. Merton.
Okay, so what is a reference group then?
Merton defined a reference group as a group to which individuals conform their behavior, even if they are not members, because they wish to be identified with it. So it's a group you look up to or aspire to be like. This aspiration might stem from wanting their economic position, their occupational role, their lifestyle, their prestige.
So it's all about aspirational identity, right? You model your behavior on a group you want to be associated with, and your sources give us some incredibly clear applications of this idea in India, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. The concepts of Sanskritization and Westernization are prime examples of how reference groups can drive social change and reflect aspirations within the Indian context.
Okay, let's start with Sanskritization. This was described by the sociologist M.N. Srinivas. What does that involve?
Sanskritization is the process where lower castes or tribal groups essentially emulate the practices, the customs, the rituals of a dominant, often higher caste, typically a Dvija or twice-born caste. They do this in an attempt to claim a higher social status for themselves over time. So the higher caste becomes their reference group. A great example comes from Surajit Sinha's work. He observed the Bhumij tribe of Barabhum, who started using the Rajputs, a high-status group, as their reference group, imitating their ways to try and elevate their own standing in the local hierarchy.
Okay, imitating a higher local group. And the other concept, Westernization.
Right. Here, the reference group wasn't necessarily a local dominant caste, but rather the British colonial rulers, or Western society more generally. For many, particularly higher castes, but also others, adopting Western customs, education, language, and values became a way to associate with modernity, progress, and frankly, power. The West became the aspirational model. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the concept of reference groups has been really instrumental in understanding patterns of social mobility and change in India. It shows how deeply identity and aspiration are intertwined with social structures.
It's a really powerful idea, isn't it? It makes you wonder, maybe subconsciously, who are your reference groups? Who do you look to, perhaps without even realizing it, when shaping your own choices, your aspirations, your behavior? Wow, what a deep dive indeed. We've covered so much ground today. These concepts, society, culture, institutions, groups, stratification, status, role, structure, reference groups, they really are the bedrock for understanding human interaction. Let's quickly hit the highlights again just to make sure these key insights really stick for you.
Absolutely. Good idea. So first, we started with the concept of society. Remember McIver's web of social relations. It's that largest interacting unit, driven by our shared needs and interdependence. The key insight: society emerges from our need for each other.
Then we tackled the comparison between society and culture, the takeaway. Society is the framework of relationships. Culture is the way of life within it. They're distinct but totally inseparable, always shaping each other.
Then social institutions. McIver and Page's established procedures. These are the stable foundations, family, government, education that fulfill needs and maintain unity. They're the backbone keeping things going.
Right. Then we dove into social groups. McIver's collection of humans in social relationships, characterized by that WE feeling. We distinguished Cooley's intimate primary groups, family, close friends, that shape us from the more formal secondary groups, work, clubs, serving specific goals.
Next up was social stratification. Society's ranking system: class, status, power, rooted in inequality. Remember the different bases: caste, class, historical estate. And that critical tension. Functionalists seeing it as efficient, Marxists as the source of conflict.
Moving to the individual, we defined status and role using Linton. Status is your position, with rights duties, either ascribed birth or achieved effort. Role is the behavior linked to that status. Key takeaway: fundamental to interaction, but modern life brings more potential for role conflict.
We then connected these with social structure, Radcliffe-Brown's total network of social relationships. It's the enduring arrangement built from institutions, statuses, roles. The Bathanga example showed how specific customs reinforce this structure.
And finally, reference groups, those groups we aspire to, conforming our behavior even if we're not members. Heyman, Merton. Instrumental in understanding social change, like Sanskritization and Westernization in India. The core idea: aspiration and identity are powerful social forces. So there you have it. You've just absorbed a pretty comprehensive understanding of how societies are built, how we navigate them, and maybe some of the hidden forces that shape our collective lives. Incredible stuff.
Yeah, and if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, understanding these fundamental building blocks, well, it doesn't just give you knowledge for knowledge's sake. It equips you with the tools, hopefully, to critically analyze the world around you and your own place within it. You start to see the invisible threads connecting everything.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for you? Well, maybe the next time you observe an interaction or think about a group you belong to, or puzzle over a societal rule, whether it's at work, in your family, reading the news, try to consider which of these concepts might be at play. You might just start to see the hidden structures holding everything together and how you fit into that incredibly intricate web. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the nature of society.
Keep thinking critically. Keep connecting the dots.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.